Hi, and a warm welcome to the Space by Stanson's podcast, where we dig into the dreams, experiences, and lessons learned from leading voices in the design industry. Our guests are the real rock stars of this show, and we're super grateful to them. Today, I'm jumping into a chat with Rita, the sustainability lead at MCM, and I've got 3 projects to ask her about. Firstly, an early memory that has shaped her career. Secondly, a current scheme we need to look out for. And lastly, a future project that would be of her wildest dreams. But hey, before we roll, we feel the love when you share, rate, or follow the show. So please go for it. Now, on to Rita.
Rita, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, and I am really looking forward to hearing a whole sustainability side of all of this, because I often talk to design architect, but this is gonna get really nitty gritty, sustainable, circular, and who knows, we might go off on a few tangents, because who doesn't love it?
I love it, so I'm happy. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Guy, for having me. I really like this. I like the format. I already said I love also how beautiful the space is. So yeah, I'm very happy to chat with you specifically about the things that I love, which is sustainability. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I'll also let the dear lady know that who designed it, that this is that you think is a beautiful space.
Yeah, no.
She'll be very pleased. But yeah, your MCM now.
Yeah.
We actually met back quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
In Woodalls Day.
Or perhaps BDG, I don't know. There's been
okay.
a few kind of transitions in my sustainability path. I think essentially what I've liked about when I look back is my career started as an architect. So I'm an architect at the moment, and my role is sustainability lead, but I always bring that architectural lens in.
Okay.
And that's how I started my career. I always been a bit of the strange architect. I really care about actually the impact on people and planet, and not specifically the aesthetics. So in the beginning of my career, that was actually really strange, and people would run away from me, architects, But I think the way that started was in that kind of architecture environment and interior design environment, where I really started to understand that there's dimensions that you can add, such as what's the impact, again, on your natural resources, on carbon, on the well-being. That comes back actually way back before even I start to work. But I always been a huge fan of what's the scientific research behind spatial strategies and things like that. So I like that data.
Mm-hmm.
And that shaped the way that I started to look into design. But then there was a moment I felt design is something that you can create in a beautiful, meaningful way,
Mm-hmm.
but comes to the delivery and you pass on. And if you don't lock well your specifications, your design, your aspirations, your targets, the delivery cannot actually get to the point that you aimed. And then also there's another thing that quite often is not discussed, which is the long term, the in-use, the way that you operate that beautiful space to create. Then is going to have users that actually, they will operate that space, they'll live in that space, they'll breathe in that space. And so I think that's why essentially I felt that the need of sustainability on the design was kind of coming to a point that I wanted to understand why sometimes wasn't working on site and on construction.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely my move to the design and build and specifically construction coordination within the sustainability world that's what I wanted to do. And that's what was my next move after being in traditional and architecture.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go to the construction world. And specifically, I really understand that when you have everything under the same umbrella, design,
Mm-hmm.
which specifically the model design and build, but at the time, kind of understanding how when you have everyone in the same umbrella and the responsibility still lies on you,
Mm-hmm.
When you commit, you have to deliver. And I always understood that could be a great weapon in terms of sustainability. So you can commit, but then you also deliver on site. So, not specifically certifications, they are really, really useful. They're not solving the sustainability problem. But again, when you commit to a specific sustainability rating or certification,
Yeah.
I find it really useful when you also control the construction delivery.
You can take more responsibility.
Yeah, I think essentially you're delivering what you promised. So,
Yeah.
but I think essentially down the line, I felt I needed to go back to traditional design because I really want to be on pioneering briefs with global brands. I was doing that already in the construction side, but essentially healthy budgets with big corporations are on the traditional side. I wanted to work for a company that had my values. And essentially, the company that I work now, as you mentioned, it's MCM. The fact that they were B Corp and obviously really knowing their directory, the way that they made decisions really was aligned with my values.
Yeah.
So I want to really be part of that team and help to really understand how we impact that in terms of our designs. But the way that a company kind of stands, in terms of social side and environmental side was important for me. So that was my move.
Yeah, so when did it start off that you said it goes right back even before education, that you were like a sustainability warrior?
Yeah.
What was it? Childhood?
I love that. Yeah.
Was it in education, childhood, how you're brought up?
So I actually have to say that, in terms of the way that started, I don't really capture a moment, but I do know that there was a year that was very, very kind of impactful in the way that I see design and how I actually thought I was going to make my career off, which was essentially, I think I've done basically an architecture master.
Mm-hmm.
And that's after, a degree and then a master. That's about 6 years that you then can do a research of a year.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, it's your last year. It's a long course, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like by 6 years in uni, you're like, wow, I learned all of this. What am I going to do with all of this knowledge? I was really fortunate that I went to do an exchange year in Bath University, which is in the UK. And then I go back to Portugal, where I'm from. And they told me that I could create as my last master kind of like project, I could create a brief from scratch and I would have a year to do research on it. For me, that was music to my ears because the fact that you can essentially focus and do reading, extensive reading, as I told you, I'm a bit of a nerd about the data, the science behind. I always really liked backed up data in terms of, like reading scientific research around a lot of things, but specifically how that impacts design. And so when I was in Bath, I came across this book, which changed my entire career, I think. I always say this, but it definitely did, which is called Healing Spaces by Sternberg. And
say that once more.
Healing Spaces.
Yeah, by
Esther Sternberg.
Perfect. Okay, I'll make a note.
Yeah. It's a very slim book, so easy reading. I thought it was very, very accessible in a aspect because it disconstructs how healing architecture should be added a lot of layers, essentially with evidence-based design. And it kind of put words on what I thought already I believed in, but evidence-based design is essentially when you act or design strategies in terms of a spatial strategies backed up by data, by scientific research. So I read what are those things that, have been conducted for years, studies that show that, for example, when you apply the curve instead of kind of like linear lines might be impactful when someone that is having a kind of healing or recovery process. When
a positive impact. Okay.
So curves, shapes, colors, for example, one thing that was really important is the impact of biophilia features, which is very, very discussed, but it has an extensive kind of research about, like, there's this doctor in the book, they refer a lot, Dr. Ulrich, that done a lot of kind of like research where a patient will be looking at a tree over their, recovering room, and their heart rate accelerates more, their healing recovery is better. He measured all of this over the years. So it's actually that kind of showing that when you add a plant to a space, when you add greenery, when you integrate biophilia, you do have an acceleration of the healing process. And for me, that changed the perspective. And air quality, daylight quality, the way that you also integrate community or social value into it. So they go through each chapter of what is important in a recovering kind of process. So for that reason, I decided that on my last project, which probably that is the first project, I think that it was my first memory of a project that I felt this is so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
I created a healing center unit specifically for recovery of alcohol addiction, because I really enjoy the fact that you could help to support recovery in a physical way, but also mental way, which again, it's something that you need to support both.
And alcohol represents that for you.
Exactly. Yeah. At the time, I thought because I was working in Lisbon in a specific neighborhood that was suffering from that specific problem.
Yeah.
So was trying to get a kind of like a center that will help that specific. So again, you needed to pick a space, you needed to pick a reason. You create your own brief, but down the line I would read more, and down the line I would shape this project itself. So, I really enjoyed it that from that you created this kind of space that was integrated with healing gardens, that was integrated with, had a spiritual space that you can just really trying to recover, in different kind of mental states that you might go from that process. Control the daylight in a way that would guide you, the way that you even see curves. How do you actually go to your room? The sensory experience of colors, specifically integrated maybe with, spaces that were just for artistic exhibitions so I tried to implement everything I learned in that book on that specific project, but then more and more research I was just digesting and adding.
Yeah.
I think that essentially brought up as architects, is in our hands that when you create a space, you do have an impact on how people feel.
100%.
And in this case, heal. And also open a door when I thought, and I read a lot about healing gardens, but also essentially how people use nature back in the days to heal. So Alvarado, which is an architect, created that kind of sanatoriums where people that suffered from asthma or certain problems, they will go and just breathe fresh air. And so the entire architecture was trying to use daylight or sunlight and the fresh air that you would have in specific forests, for example. And that started to be, all right, okay, so nature, planet, integrative of forests. So that opened the door of essentially understanding as well how to incorporate like materials and construction that was more sustainable as well. And so I think it was obviously an open door, but that's how I really think it shaped my meaningful. Every time you do a space, you can question what's going to be impacting. And essentially, if you add those dimensions beyond the aesthetics, it's in your hands. And I love that. I think it made me really enjoy it.
I 100% get your energy on that. It's so nice to hear it.
Oh, thank you.
I often quote, probably to everybody's boredom, norm architects. They speak about how, I love them, by the way.
Say again.
Norm, Norm. I can't spell, so I hope that's right. Norm architects, they say the spaces we inhabit and the objects we live with influence how we think, feel, and behave. That's some statement. Yeah. And it's so true. Yeah. Like, so true. But and I'm massive. I just think everybody's got so much more in them to give. Everybody's got so much potential. Everybody can flourish. I flourish so much more mentally and physically. Like, I think we're just so much like self-limiting, and by surrounding like kind of influences really, and negativity maybe. But when you kind of unlock that, what you're talking about, and integrating with nature and the impact that has, and so many ways of spaces, and I'm a massive believer in culture and management leadership styles and that type of thing, but you can really start totally changing someone's trajectory to a point that they might not even recognize themselves. They might actually be like, was I that person? Like you, and that is totally possible.
Yeah.
So massively bought into that, and how the spaces can change how people think and feel. And it's so nice to hear of sustainability from a people-centric perspective. The planet's important, but it's people that's at the heart of it all, isn't it? Having a place for the people in the future.
I think so. And also for me, perhaps because I'm very sensitive to something called like sick building syndrome, which is, essentially in a most kind of like simple way, it's when a building is making you sick for some reason.
And why would a building make you sick?
So essentially, there's a lot of indicators. Quite often they're invisible indicators like air quality, light quality, could be toxins in the air, could be something that you're touching or a fabric, could be the way that you don't feel safe in a space, could be the lighting levels. So a lot of kind of dimensions, as I say, kind of like sensorial experience, but also health indicators, but also inclusive and accessible kind of design aspects of, your kind of like spaces make you feel healthy or not. I'm extremely sensitive when I don't have daylight around me. I feel it with a big headache when I don't have daylight. And so I will seek for the daylight. You'll see me in a corner. If some space doesn't have daylight, you'll see me literally perhaps outside. You'll see me on the edge of a window because I suffer from it. And so I love that link. There is something wrong. Your body's trying to protect you. Where is the daylight? You suddenly are in the daylight and you feel better. And so there is equipment that could mimic that. We have in our office something I love this, which is, it's kind of like lights, which they're provided by Dyson, that imitate circadian light. They don't imitate, they have circadian light kind of embedded in them. So what they do is they are in our pods, which they don't have windows, they're acoustic pods. And when you turned on them to you, the light levels are imitating the light levels of the outside. And like the day goes by and they imitated what the sun is doing, which means that is connected to your circadian rhythm, which is basically your internal clock. And so it is an equipment, is it a light unit? It doesn't solve, but specifically there is strategies that you can incorporate when you don't have a window, although you should always maximize that kind of thing. But it's thinking about that. It's incorporating that into your design. So I'm a massive fan of like, at least sick building syndrome. It makes a lot of people taking attention to that, They don't want their people sick or, reducing on.
What's 3 things that a designer can pick up and actually change if they don't want to have sick building syndrome?
Ooh, the 3 things. I mean,
5 things.
I don't know. Like essentially,
what's something that you've touched on quite a few bits there?
Yeah, I mean,
in terms of light, air quality for materials, etc. If a designer's got a project that's people are suffering from sick building in it? What should they really start tackling first, or is it a questionnaire, or how can they sort that out?
Well, this should surveying what's in place. That's always a good place to start. In terms of sick building syndrome, obviously there's interesting parameters that you could go through it. The WELL certification or FitWell will give you parameters, but then there's another thing that is very interesting, I think this is correct. It's called sick building syndrome. Like it's a diagram that was developed by the Health Building Institute by Harvard, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And then they developed like key parameters that you should look into it. Again, light quality is a big one. Air quality is also really important. But then sensorial experience, the way that the tactile experience is introduced is also really important. The way that the contrasts of surfaces, if they making you feel safe, the way that you navigate spaces, you know, to foster collaboration or to foster focus. Or so the different zones. So I've heard the other day someone saying that they feel nervous to go to the office because this is an office that we are trying to, obviously we're working with a client to move to another office, but the current office doesn't have a space where they can have a call. And that makes them feel really nervous because they cannot have private calls without being heard. So essentially what I like about it, it is spatial strategies, but combined with policies, combined by spaces. And you have to have that offer. You have to create the right space also is for fit for purpose because, you know, in 3 years, maybe it doesn't work anymore. And also flexibility, I think. So obviously I'm merging now a lot of things, but the sick building syndrome, it is something that you should just investigate what's currently in place and if something could be improved, but also you should be more holistic. It's not just about health indicators, it's also about physical and like mental well-being. So,
yeah, nice. So I was going to ask you about an early memory of a project which really shaped your career. And I'm wondering, have you kind of covered that with your project? Was that what you're going to talk about, or did you have something else you're going to say?
I mean, that is definitely my earliest memory. The thing I could say in terms of that is the first project that opened up the door, but the way that I could say is when I brought that into the industry, it was a very interesting way because it was, if you think about, you know, like 8 years ago or 6 years ago, 6 to 8 years ago, sustainability was not the buzzword that is today, right? No. And so if I would drop that interest in conversations, and I was very lucky that I started to work with kind of global brands that had aspirations already for sustainability 8 years ago, or again, more the years passed by, they developed their guidelines around sustainability. So I was very lucky that I worked in major retrofit buildings, major campuses that had them. But then when I start to talk about them or wanted to coordinate them, everyone would run away from me. And I think that really shaped the way I started to almost advocate for it because I saw the potential, but no one really wanted to discuss that. Specifically the design side, they thought it was the technical boring. It's for the engineers. Why are you trying to talk about air quality? This is about the 50 shades of the tiles, you know, of pink. And I was like specifically very interested on, wait, but we can say this is for BREEAM reasons or WELL reasons, but we are doing a big green roof or a blue roof, which is a water harvesting, you know, collecting system that gets water from the skies and then suddenly it's a circular system. So for me, it was almost to make this bridge of, right, that's the impact, but also that's the design. Make a bridge between the designers and the impact on people and nature, and then make it a storytelling that is compelling to your design team, the project managers, the sustainability consultants. And I think that was potentially, and again, like I told you, the first projects I work in a bigger scale were big campuses that had, luckily back in the days, already all the certifications that now most of them will have. That allowed to have budgets. I'm not saying certifications at all solve problems, but having budgets allocate resource and time to consider specific holistic sustainability and health and well-being, which is at the time BREEAM and WELL were going through that. And that was I think that was my first integration of that in the real world, let's say.
You've mentioned a few times in this chat that people ran away from you when
back in the day.
No, not. Back in the day, definitely. I guess people are like probably hugging you now, but yeah, that specifically early days, talking about sustainability, this kind of data-driven side to design.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
I love
you're
a good
being
challenge.
repelled, if you like. How did
Not particularly repelled. I would say, I think it wasn't considered as important or integrated into the design. Was seen as something that you would have to do. The consultant, for example, the sustainability consultant would not come as integrated as I thought they should, because essentially when you're designing, that should be added as a principle. That should be something that you are designing from that core, not an add-on, right? Or are they chasing the designers? And that's how I seen it. But for that to happen, I needed to learn how the certifications and how the parameters or, the targets worked. So I could go back to my design world and like almost be ahead of the game. That's how I always been working, by the way, is learning how the technical world works, go back to my design and think what is going to make my designers following this in an inspirational way. So like you said, they don't run away from me. But back in the days, I seen that as a challenge. For me, it was like understanding that project managers did not understand when they discuss things such as VE processes, and they would cut green roofs or blue roofs, like it looked like a game of cards. And for me, it was like, oh, no, because actually you can storytell that you have a blue roof. So it's understanding that even back in the days, people didn't really understand what was the impact or what was even the pieces of the puzzles that were moving around sustainability. So if you would have the knowledge, you would have a bit of, the kind of convincing power, and clients would listen to the storytelling. So that's how I saw as a challenge. I never thought I was very different the way that I look into design, but I thought that was a superpower instead of, But running away, it started to change, like you said. Now people are very open to it. We are in this era of disconstructing back what things mean, of guidance, what does that mean being regenerative? What does that mean being net zero? What does that mean being accessible and inclusive? And I think essentially that's opening a lot of doors, but it's still at all a long way. But it is now not people running away from you, it's people inviting you. And I think that is going on the right way. There's lots of work to do, I have to say.
Oh, no, I agree. We have come a long way, but then when you look how far there is to go, do you know what I mean? But at least people are embracing it, having the conversations, which maybe they weren't doing to start with. So 8 years ago, zooming forward to today, what's the current project you're working on, and how's that changed? I mean, I know you've touched on some of the points already, but what's come out or about to come out that we should know about?
So I guess I find that obviously for confidentiality reasons, I'm not name dropping any project, but what I liked what's happening now is we have projects in different scales with different aspirations around sustainability. And when I mention sustainability, they'll have aspirations that could be more on the environmental side or on more social side and people side and well-being side. So this duality happens a lot, and specifically because we are a B Corp company that has that social dimension, but also we have science-based targets, kind of ambitious roadmap around our net zero strategy. And so that then has also the other dimension, which is the environmental one. So some clients actually came to us because of that dimension on the B Corp side and also our sustainability DNA. And I thought that was like something that was really, really important, because essentially what's happening is clients are picking their supply chain and what's their own supply chain sustainability vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that was really crucial, that at the moment we're working for projects that they picked us because of who we are and we stand for sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
not just because we create beautiful designs. And a lot of the projects that I've seen, the fact that they have different scales, the bigger scale ones, we have projects currently that have really good aspirational sustainability briefs. And as I said to you before, it's good to see that the people that have a healthy budget,
Mm-hmm.
they still have to push on this, you know, kind of like we still work in a linear approach, right? Instead of a circular one. We still work in a market of not second life. It's very kind of, so figuring out how to almost being pioneering,
Mm-hmm.
and also like managing reputation risk, and also trying to do the best for sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening. It's projects that, yeah, they are embedding a lot of sustainability in the dual dimensions. But in terms of how that is in kind of projects, for example, with the scale of our office,
Mm-hmm.
you've been to our office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So our office, it's a project that I call, and I like to say that is almost like the project in a long term that I like to show to our clients or potential clients, because we live in a space that we've designed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the space was trying to test a lot the sustainability approach that we're trying to test in our clients' projects. So, for example, I don't know if you know about this, the kind of story of our office, but it's all from second life items.
Mm-hmm.
So all the furniture is being procured as a second life from a vintage furniture dealer, or subscription based, which means that every 6 months we can revise the furniture that we have,
Mm-hmm.
and we can actually understand if that's working for us, changing the layout. That element that is there is a second life element, so it's been somewhere, has a passport tracking. And
This is part of the subscription furniture?
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
which is opens doors again, you know, it opens doors into the budget. Suddenly is not on that drop-in delivery. Suddenly is a long-term budget, which is incredible, because you can, over using the space, and with all these discussions about Monday to and Fridays are empty and Tuesday to Thursdays are, so all of that is changing the way that we're using the space. So that flexibility is really important, but also is second life elements. Our coffee machine and printer are second hand. Sometimes they're a bit moody, I have to say. So again, but then you will see that essentially the second hand, second life kind of furniture items will have a scratch, which I quite often say it's a story to tell. Our like partitions, we were trying to test this prototype, and the prototype is a little bit like, do you know the Google ones called the Jacks?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Dismantable.
Okay, yeah.
Made of timber. We tried to do that in a different way, where we work with the joiner, and we create this kind of like partition timber studs wall that has recycled jeans as an isolation.
Mm-hmm.
It's made of 100% recycled jeans inside, and then it's all bolted, not glued. So essentially, if we want to dismantle it all,
Mm-hmm.
the fit out could disappear the next week. And I found that once we test that in our office, we experienced a lot of things as market not mature enough in terms of circularity, but also we experienced what is the supply chain. So how do you bring the social value into it? And so that's why it's a project that I like to show to our clients, because our cleaning services are B Corp. The products of cleaning, the kind of like the soaps, are all kind of like vegan, cruelty-free, and B Corp. The plant providers, for example, is a charity that supports women that came out of prison. They're trying to go back to workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So it really allows us to test that it's still a kind of a kind of long-term decision making on a project,
Mm-hmm.
and also allow us to test what is working, not working, but costing every time you have a new kind of decision in the office, and that that then we can test that to our clients. So yeah, the office at the moment is probably one of my favorite projects to show around because it showcases all of that dual dimensions.
And it's stunning.
Thank you for that. I actually really like the office. It's
I do
beautiful,
love it. How long ago did you do it?
So I usually say I came with the office because we moved in November last year. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's nearly a year old.
Yeah. So we're celebrating a year
In
this
a few
month,
weeks.
like in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Oh, I think we definitely will shout out on that. But it brought projects and it brought this conversation that is possible to make it beautiful and meaningful. But it's for different scales as well. And that's the conversation, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have always to adapt sustainability to different scales, different during like tendency, kind of like longevity, 3 years is not the same as planning or designing for 20 years and things like that. So
it's a year down the road. What mistakes, or more positively, what learnings have you or MCM picked out? So if you're redesigning that office again today, what would you do differently? Does the subscription model work for the furniture? Does the partitioning work? What challenges have you had? What's not worked?
I like that question a lot because it's essentially, I think one of the things I ask, so there's a design team that really developed this kind of, the designer, like I said, even on the partitions, for example. And they learned a lot that, first of all, you need to work with the right suppliers. And that is something that it starts to become, obviously, you have to know who's your partners that you will trust on that. In this specifically, the joiner company that work with us, it was a really great partnership. They wanted to test it, the sustainability. But for example, in the beginning, when we moved in, I remember the acoustics so they created the partition, but also acoustic pods. And they just, for some reason, the acoustic pods were created. It was kind of a prototype. And between some of the pods, you could hear some, some sound. So then you have to investigate, why is that working? Was it through the ducts? Was it through the ventilation? And I think that was something, for example, you need to be acoustic. You are in acoustic pods. So that was something that we still had to investigate how you're going to acoustically treat it, how you're going to go back, maybe put more insulation. I think specifically on what could be improved as well is we at the moment on this stage where we noticed that, as everyone is experienced, Monday to Fridays were not very a full kind of office. People tend to come more Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. So facing that fact that the office might not be as in quite full on those days, MCM decided to open up their doors to other companies that might want to rent out the space. And that is being tested at the moment, again, because it wasn't working the way that it was just us there and there was a lot of empty space. But the fact that the space, like I said to you, now needs to change because essentially there's more people coming, other companies. There needs to be a flexibility, but also privacy division. And so, for example, subscription-based work really well for us. I'm a big fan as well of the model because, again, it's quite circular. And I can give you then, in our office, in our website, you will have the name of all of our partners and collaborators.
Oh, cool.
I think that's quite important to shout out. But essentially, I like that every 6 months or every year, you can rearrange it. And that's what's happening at the moment. We need to rearrange the space. And that space is, you don't own the furniture. You could just kind of rearrange it, and then something is moved and you can just readjust. So essentially it's a kind of it's not fixed. It's been moving, it's been changing the way that we use the office. But yeah, it has its challenges. I think specifically when you look for second life items, you're not going to have the right color, the right color, the right shades of something that the designers really wanted, because essentially you will be working with elements that you want to reuse. So I think is integrating that kind of creativity where it might not be the right color, but it might be a color that goes well either way. Or sometimes we have suppliers that want to showcase or want to give us elements and they're not secondhand, and we have to politely decline because we only want something that it already had a life and is not the purpose to just go as a first life in our office. So essentially, you have to keep reminding you why you're making certain decisions, and you are fighting with a linear market. And I think that's the reminder of you still have to be ahead of the game to almost foreseen why it's not working or how to make it work in a circular way. So essentially there's lots of things that could improve. But yeah, again, it's ongoing. So
It is. I'm sitting here thinking you're making all of these design adjustments every 6 months or a year. And you are a workspace design consultancy firm. So of course you are. If I'm a law firm or a bank, or I've kind of almost got to have a subscription to your services that you come in and assess where I'm at every 6 months, because they can't just suddenly start moving their furniture around, or can they?
I mean, essentially, I think we're talking about two different things, right? One thing is being partners of our clients, where when they need a strategy, change management piece that is going to evaluate why it's not working or why, really understanding on a holistic kind of specific. I find that subscription-based, specifically this company, it's different. It's not through... We can incorporate a circularity ethos, and that is going to come with that supplier. But you also could go directly to the supplier and understand how to engage. As a supplier, this is not working. The furniture items, could you give me more, or we're going to stop the subscription here? That's not the point. What we actually want is having a continuous conversation with our clients where we could say, there's a lot of things to think about here. How is your team working? And that's why we have a department for strategy, we have a department for interiors, and we have a department for architecture, where from different, kind of departments, we can support our clients in different ways. Strategy is a big one, because quite often there's not direct thing that is not working, but there's a more thorough reason for it. And so we do have clients coming back to us for that ongoing use of spaces that we delivered in the past. And I think that shows the success. You want to be, as I think you might experience, you want to be a kind of come as a partnership. And I think that's really meaningful when you have kind of like return clients that come back to you.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying, is that almost, because the spaces are so fluid, that even what you deliver today, in 6 months' time, a year's time, that will need that kind of, that strategy piece, but in a lighter touch way, I guess, but almost just a review of the space, where you're at, what's working, what's not, is there any changes? Okay, this is how we could do it, this is how we could utilize the subscription model to work for us, and moving forward. I can see, because you just probably do it all in-house, like organically without thinking, whereas somebody else would need to just keep enlisting your services and have almost like a keep coming back. I like it.
And in-use phase is so important. And
in what space?
In-use, an in-use phase is so important, because essentially is when people are using the space. And I always say this, which if you think about it, you can create the most efficient, sustainable, and mindful workplace. If it's not well managed or fit for purpose of that specific client, it will be the most empty space, which is not sustainable at all. So it's understanding how to have, you don't lock it for one solution, but you could grow and you can actually revisit and you can improve. But the way that you manage your building has a huge impact. Carbon has a huge impact. Air quality, we touch base on that, but also it might not be supporting the right policies. It might not be like the way that you change policies, even the ones, how many days you come back to the office, that might not be aligned with the way that you designed the office before. So that's what I like about it. It's an ongoing. Nice. It's not just a dot in time,
so keep that connection up. I love it. What is your project of your wildest dreams? Where is it in the world, or in the universe?
Oh, you did. I don't know. I think when I think about it, I mean, it's going to be obviously because this is almost like you asking me what would be the project that I wanted to work like in a perfect world, right? And for me, I always think that at the moment what's happening is this aspirational uh, kind of design way, but you still trying to test that in, as I said before, kind of an urban landscape of we still have limited renewable resources. We still have a lot of segregation of, community versus corporate. We still have, and if I think about my favorite kind of project would be a project that is going to be tested in an urban context, but coming as a almost like regenerative, thriving island. So it's testing what we've been trying, all of us trying to say that is going to happen, or we all working towards to, which is, the dream is going to be fully electrical. It will be, not connected. It's going to be kind of like solar powered all over. I know I'm being so much like, it is kind of like, if you think about it, it's going to have a circular water system. There's not going to be waste on any kind of like water, energy. But most of all, people will come to the space and will work in that kind of like almost what is aligned to what they want to do. So providing a lot of functions, but giving that nurture aspect, and brings as well community and the corporate, because at the moment, if you look at the City of London, it's not integrated. And it's been something that we created beautiful buildings, but then most of them are quite empty, right? In terms of, if you think about it, if you like, and then others like King's Cross fountains are fully of life. So how do you bring that coming across to this kind of workplace? And I think when I use the word regenerative is because it's been a very used, and this ecosystem is something that you do think and see that you taking, because essentially when you create a project, you're taking something, right? You're extracting something, you create emissions, you somehow you're going to change that specific kind of place, but you also in setting and adding and you creating value. So I find that that's the project that I would love to work with, which is it's testing and failing because it's needed, but also is kind of being not afraid that, that you're just really trying to understand technology. Is it going to be super smart, but how is that connected to people-centric at the same time? People are not treated like robots. Is it going to be solar powered? But what happens if you do have kind of like too much electricity? Could you actually then power and like selling it? Can it make it part of, your almost ecosystem that somehow works together in a regenerative way? So I would say that that's mine. It is maybe a bit, biased because it's all about sustainability, but I still think we need to see a project that is essentially testing that. And one of the things I say, I've done this kind of, I don't know if you ever heard about something called Living Building Challenge.
No.
So it's a certification. It's in America. It's still not very kind of yet used in Europe, but it has this holistic approach that you also, when you're doing a project, you're looking into kind of like, carbon, you're looking into efficiency, water, but you're also looking into beauty, you're looking into equity, you're looking into kind of social value, you're looking into toxic levels, which opens this huge conversation about what are materials made of, those chemicals that you don't know. You go to a supermarket and the ingredients are there, and you don't know how much this chair was made of, or if it has toxins within the chair that you might be touching or breathing. So it's something that I wish I would have a client wants to do this without budget constraint. And I still think we are moving there, but we still don't see it. But yeah, I think so.
It's almost like a self-sustaining ecosystem.
Self-sustaining ecosystem, a nurturing ecosystem. Yeah, that's
When you say nurturing, what do you mean?
I would say it's like nurturing means that it's providing people a space that they actually create their best work, feeling their best, kind of like healthy. It's supporting their mental and physical kind of well-being. So that's the nurturing, is providing a platform that makes you creating your best work and also feel your best professional self. That's the way I use nurturing.
Oh no, I love it.
Yeah.
And do you think in your self-sustaining ecosystem, would there be like sort of yoga retreats and like water for meditation and that type of thing? Is that what you're kind of, is that what's in your vision when you're thinking nurturing?
Yeah, I think like when I was thinking about that, definitely, and I forgot to say that because that's a huge part, is having this integration with nature. And having that kind of, how do you bring nature indoors? And specifically I'm Portuguese, so the weather, right? Not always the best for being outside and eating out outside, but creating environments, specifically a patio, or, like almost like imagine an Eden project, is it an Eden project? Is in Cornwall? I don't know if it is, but Eden project, the one that has kind of like, have you seen it? It's like the domes where they create this entire kind of like greenery.
No,
It's like basically it's this domes that create different biodiversity environments that grow different plants.
Don't think I know.
They are.
I'm thinking of another
project.
one called the Newt.
No, this is called Eden Project. You'll have to look into it.
Yeah.
So it's basically an office within Eden Project, I would say. So it's this combination with nature, how you bring nature within a space and testing that. Like, I think, again, healing gardens, we discussed that. But I think essentially providing as well activities, like you said, yoga, perhaps like even kind of workshops that you can educate your staff, making conference, open to the public, open to artists from the community. So you do use the space not just for the office, but for the different functions. I think that essentially it would be great to see.
I want to come to this space. It sounds amazing, Anita.
Me too. Bring me a client.
Yeah, exactly. Who would like a self-sustaining ecosystem?
In the city of London, please.
Yeah, no, too right. Very connected by public transport.
Well, the thing is essentially to show that it's possible, that we all work in technologies and also strategies that we could create that in urban spaces, because I think it's possible at the moment to do that away when you are inserted in a nature landscape, but in a city, urban context, it's still not made for it. So it's allowing that if there's one showcasing days possible, then spreads across.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. I love the energy. Love the vision. It's great what you've shared about your early memories, about that book. I'm definitely going to make a note of that and how that really sort of kind of set you on your career trajectory in terms of healthy spaces. I think I've remembered it correctly.
Yeah.
And then your office, is really interesting to hear about that, specifically because I've been there, and obviously if anyone ever wants to go there, it's beautiful and it's definitely worth a visit. And then this whole ecosystem, and what a great 3 projects to talk about, Anita. That's been really inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you wanted to, last word you wanted to shout out before we wrap up?
No, it's really great to have like this conversation. I mean, I could talk about sustainability for hours, but essentially if someone is listening that has the power to make decisions around how to incorporate more sustainability targets with those 2 dimensions into projects, really consider, and you have it, and in every profession, every job role into the built environment, you will have an impact. So yeah, really consider that. I think that's what I would say. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for listening. I'm also very grateful to all our guests. or if you know who else would like to join the podcast. Share the names, we're always open to hearing. Until next time, keep happy, keep healthy, and take care.